Polarity goes much deeper than you might actually be thinking right now. The usual context or environment where the term polarity is being used is, for example, in a political context, like the polarity of the nation's people, the divide which is taking place. Like half of one nation says this guy should be leading us, or this is the ideology we should be perceiving and pursuing, and the other half is saying, no, this is not what we should be pursuing. This should be our leader, and this is what we should be pursuing. So polarity already in this context shows a difference between two agents. Let's call it agents. Often the term polarity is also used in a more spiritual context, like the term duality. We all know yin and yang, for example. We can't see white without black, or a contrast of white. Because if everything is white, we only see white, so we don't know if white is actually something different than its environment, because the only thing we see is white. We can't perceive white as white if there's nothing else which is not white. This already also refers to a difference in agents. Or you can't know kindness without knowing malicity. If you haven't experienced someone being malice or hateful or unkind, we also don't really know what kindness means. We will take it for granted. This is more of a spiritual context, but it's also fairly often being used in conversations I have or conversations I see on the internet. But polarity, the term polarity, actually goes much, much deeper than these two examples. Why? These two examples that I just mentioned are expressions of a mechanism, a principle behind these curtains, you could say. So if we take off these curtains, or the expression, or the visible, that which we can perceive, what is actually going on behind this? So I already coined the term that polarity is a difference. This difference can be quite small. This difference can be quite large. Let's say black and white are the opposites. Then there's also a lot of space in between, the gray area, where the difference can be more or less, depending on where on the scale it is. But we will come to this a little bit later. Let's go a bit further into this. A difference is only possible with at least two agents. And these two agents or components, they take place in a space and a time. A phenomenon always includes a movement. And a movement already includes time, because something can't move if you can't perceive it in a time period. This difference of two components in a space and a time leads to a motion with a direction away from the polarity. Now, in the science world, this is called entropy. This is the universe trying to even everything out. The inevitable outcome of this is that two components will meet each other. Because if two components are in motion, then inevitably, sometime, if time is an infinite component, there will be an interaction between two agents. And this interaction leads to a certain reaction. Depending on the nature or character of these two components or agents, this will lead to a consequence on the structure, or better yet, the form of these two components, which in turn will lead to a different form and this will in turn lead to a new polarity with its environment. These two components are different from each other, and depending on how we view these two components with our mind's eye, you could say, we can term these components as a system and a stimulus. Usually there's a less movable system and a more movable stimulus, which puts force on this system. Now, this is always interchangeable. Like I said, it's our mind's eye which perceives what is a system and what is its environment or the stimulus acting upon the system, because in reality, this is all one big whole. There is no clear border. This is something we humans create, but it is something valuable because this makes us able to work with this perceived reality. So we create this border between stimulus or system and its environment. Now, this system will have certain properties, a nature, a character. This will be showed in the resiliency of the system on the stimulus. Depending on if this system is a complex system or a complex adaptive system, it will show a different pattern of behavior. But I will be talking about this in a later video. For now, all we have to know is the system can show a response in resiliency. Is it able to take up the force which is implied on it? Or is it not able to do this? And will this lead to a very visible change in its form or its structures? Now, the stimulus, of course, from the environment of the system will also have a nature or a character. And this changes depending on the intensity or frequency in which it is showed upon this system. Let's say, for example, I give you one kiss in 1 second. Now, this won't be much of a force upon you, right? It's just one kiss. Very elegant, maybe. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But you'll be able to absorb this quite well, depending on the situation. Maybe if the situation is not really that good for it, it will have a bigger reaction. But usually, this probably won't have that big of a reaction. Now, let's say the intensity of this is quite low. It's just one kiss. And the frequency is also quite low. It's just one kiss. But now, let's say, for example, I kiss you 1,000 times in 1 second. Now, this will lead to an increase in frequency, but the intensity stays the same. It's the same kiss, but the frequency increases. Now, will this have the same effect as one kiss? No, it won't. It will probably leave some mark on your cheek. Probably a bruise or maybe even a wound. Maybe some blood will spill out, but there will be a difference than what was before I gave you these 1,000 kisses, because the structures, the system wasn't able to fully take in these forces. So it leads to a change in its form. This is just one stupid example and doesn't really show the complexity behind this polarity mechanism, but it gives you a certain idea of how a polarity is already in itself quite complex. And depending on the nature of these polarities, it will have certain outcomes on the system it is involved in. Because depending on the nature of these polarities, these substances or components or agents, their reaction with each other will have possibilities of outcomes. And with time passing by, these outcomes will lead to a change in form, becoming more and more complex, eventually leading to a new level of complexity or a new dimension which is created. Like, let's say, for example, from a cell to multiple cells with each other, creating the dimension of tissue. Now, this will have a new emergent behaviors because the level of complexity has increased so much that 1 + 1 is not 2, but 1 + 1 is 3. thereby saying the behavior changes so much that the inherent behaviors of the level of complexity below it from the cell is still present in the tissue, but actually a new function is added towards it, which isn't shown in the level of complexity which is below it. This is a very beautiful example, like a flock of birds interacting with each other. Now, one bird has certain characteristics. You can see one bird flying, and you will see it behaves in a certain way. This behavior is still the same when it is flying with 50 other birds, but there is a new emergent behavior, like one being formed out of these many birds. So a new behavior arises. This is what I mean with 1 plus 1 equals 3 when it comes to the behavior of these systems. And this goes on and on and on and on and on until complexity rises and rises and new dimensions are created and new level of complexities are reached and new behaviors are attained and new possibilities are being made possible, creating to more and more polarities and so on and so on. Now, what I wanted to tell you is that polarity is not just a sociology or politically used term or something which is used in spirituality. Actually, polarity might be a fundamental principle for creation and something to explore when you see stuff happening around you. Everything shows differences interacting with each other on the level of molecules, cells, tissues, systems, organs, organisms with each other, social circles, cultures, nations, international communities, and so on and so on. These levels keep rising and rising, having the same mechanism behind it, creating the new layers. So, morph well, be interested in your surroundings, see if you can already implement some of this polarity mechanism around you in your thought, and you will see you understand your environment better and better. So, catch you in the next one.